Hello and welcome back to The Movies Made Us Do It. Me and Matt are back. How are you, Matt?
I'm pretty good, sir. How are you?
I'm well. Yes, I'm looking forward to talking through Blue Velvet. Oh God, I haven't watched this film for ages.
It's been a while since I've seen it as well.
Yeah, it's been so long. I really enjoyed rewatching it. It's as surrealist as I remember. You know, it's as Lynchian as I remember. It wasn't
surreal and disturbing as it's always been.
Yep.
Yeah,
Still,
I don't think it's lost any of its bite. I think some classic.
God, in some ways, I think it. You know, I think it's aged, made it worse. I don't know. It's almost got more bite now. I don't know whether it's because I'm seeing it with older eyes. I don't know.
Maybe that is the case. You know, maybe understand the nature of what's going on more. Than, certainly, when I first watched it, I probably didn't.
No, I don't think I had a fucking clue what was going on.
I didn't think I got it very much at all when I first watched it.
No, me either.
You know, that's the way it is. And the weird thing is, I first watched it on TV, and I watched it not because of David Lynch, because at that point I didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
But I watched it because of Cal MacLachlan, because I'd seen June, and I saw in the paper that on the listings that he was in this movie, and I thought, okay, I'll watch that. I liked him. He was great in June. Yeah. So it was only later that I found out that they were the same director and other actors are in. You know, you've got, Dean Stockwell who was in June, and Jack Nance as well, and you know, you've got all these characters that you just think, oh, he was in June too, and that person was in June.
Yes.
So yeah, it was only much later that, you know, when I started having an interest in directors and finding out about stuff like that I realised that they were linked that way, not just by
characters. Yeah.
And you can kind of see why he chose MacLachlan. He's kind of he's like his surrogate. It's like his avatar.
Yeah, he kind of is.
Lynch himself has sort of said that. I mean, even in this movie, Lynch said that his character wears the clothes that he wore when he was that age and wandering around his hometown. You know, so you can see that MacLachlan's got this sort of thing that Lynch kind of sees in himself, sort of thing. And I really like that.
Yeah. When did you first see it?
I'm guessing it must have been late 80s, I think.
Oh, okay.
Way too young for it.
Yeah. Well, I was definitely well into the 90s before I saw this, obviously. Yeah. But yeah, certainly made an impression. It's one of the Lynch films I watch less, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I haven't watched it for a long time. I really enjoyed rewatching it though. It was great.
I mean,
I still sometimes wonder whether. Well, I guess we'll get into it. I sometimes wonder whether Dennis Hopper even had a script or whether they just let Dennis Hopper go mad.
Well, that's the thing about so when they were shopping for the actor for Frank, I think is it John Saxon? Not John Saxon. What's his bloody name? The guy who was one of the bad guys in Total Recall. Not the head bad guy. The
Ironside.
Michael Ironside, that's it. Michael Ironside says it was written for him.
Okay, I can see that.
But you know, a lot of people were sort of, you know, campaigned for, and a lot of people who, you know, over all the characters, people that were sought after, all of them turned it down because of the violence in the
Sure.
But Hopper got the script and he phoned him and said, I have to play Frank. I am Frank.
Well, he certainly. Well, he's
sort of like, wow, that.
Yeah.
You know, when somebody says, "I'm the psychopath that you wrote,"
I am the psychopath you're looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, you sort of think, do I really want the real psychopath I wrote? It's a bit sort of weird.
Yeah, I mean, he is weirdly comfortable in this role.
Yes. It feels like it was written for him.
It really does. Yeah, it really does. Now that you've said Michael Ironside, I'm like, yeah, I can see that actually. Yeah. But in my mind, this was always Dennis Hopper's role, you know.
And you know, other characters like the Laura Dern character was originally envisioned for Molly Ringwald.
Okay.
And she looked at the script, and apparently her mother read the script and went, "Absolutely not!
Yeah,
no way." And I think even things like Val Kilmer was up for the McLaughlin role, and he said it was pornographic, apparently, so he turned it down. So there was a lot of actors, you know. Also, I mean, even Harry Dean Stanton, who you know worked with him, and said no. You know, so there was. The whole idea of this movie, I think, kind of. I mean, it had been floating around since the 70s, according to Lynch. He'd had this idea for a while, and he just couldn't get anybody interested. And then after the failure of June, he was completely toxic. You know, nobody fucking wanted to touch him. And then Dino De Laurentiis basically said he'd do it, but he'd have to take a cut in his own pay, and he'd take a cut on the budget. And I think it was the cheapest movie that Laurentiis did that year.
Okay.
And subsequently, because it didn't cost that much,
it actually made quite a bit.
I think the budget was $6 million, and that was like, you know, really low for even for De Laurentiis. And because of that, he basically had no sort of desire to go and check in on him very much. And you know, Lynch himself had said, "I want, you know, total autonomy on it," and they gave him that, which is why it is so weird, because it's the, you know, what he did was I would say he got away with it, as it were. You know, it was like, because no one was watching him.
Yeah, this is David Lynch with no filter. Yeah, or no oversight.
I mean, he says about Dune that Dune was his greatest sorrow because he just had no control over what was happening on that movie, and it was just agony for him.
I still like it.
I love that movie. I
still like it.
Said it many times. I think it's still better than the new versions.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like I need to rewatch Lynch's again with you know, more recent eyes to kind of make that decision. But yeah, maybe. Certainly the, you know,
Spice Diver Kai.
Yeah, the Spice Diver Kai is
fucking
wonderful.
Tremendous. And I think one of the other stipulations on this movie was also that he had to make it 2 hours.
And he did, to the button.
Well, yes.
I mean, it literally is 2 hours.
There is 4 hours of movie that Lynch shot, and they found an hour of footage at some point which has been put onto the Blu-ray. And there's lots of, you know, missing. Annoyingly, there's lots of scenes that with Carl's character and his mum and aunt that I think would have really fleshed out that relationship a lot better. It would have been more interesting, because they didn't really get much to do in this movie.
No.
But there's lots of stuff with them that would have been nice. But there's apparently still an hour completely missing somewhere. Maybe they'll find it one day, but there's still an hour missing of this movie.
Right. Well, let's get into it. We open with Blue Velvet, and it's a very almost, at least initially, very film noir kind of opening.
Yeah.
With the Blue Velvet behind it, very simple title.
And you have those blue velvet curtains, which
which again says to me film noir. You know, it's very simple. It's very, you know.
And I think it's a theme that he uses quite a lot in his stuff about, you know, not necessarily blue velvet curtains, but curtains and almost like the pulling away of you know, the thing or
there's always that kind of symbology for sure. Yeah, and I mean, we see it here as well with the ear and everything else. It all kind of plays a part. But yeah, I always thought the credits are like super classy. Those opening credits. And then we kind of pan down on this idyllic, wonderful summer's day, beautiful colored roses, because it's all, you know, white picket fence, red roses. You know, you got the fire guy waving and stuff on the truck, kids crossing the road.
And it's 50s idyllic.
Yeah, it's idyllic 50s, which I think is like the most idyllic period when you think of like Americana and you know, it kind of is the 50s. So I can see why he did that.
And that's the one of the things that, you know, Lynch said there were three things that made him that contributed to this movie. And it was, one was just the feeling he got from the title Blue Velvet. There was a feeling that came with that title that, you know, just for some reason intrigued him. And then there was the song Blue Velvet, which he said it conjured up visions of the 50s. And
for sure.
That sort of perfect time, which, you know, really wasn't a perfect time at all, but
no,
we all have this sort of vision.
But the vision of it is, yes,
50s Americana was like, and that's kind of what it is.
Which it's interesting, isn't it? Because we've lived through something similar ourselves, right? Yeah, because the way people portray the 80s, we're like, no. You know, like, I get it. That's what Hollywood tells you. And it's the same with the 50s, you know? Or any era, probably.
That
but
sort of thing. He said, and the other thing was, you know, just that he just this sort of feeling that he had, and that song, and the idea of this ear. You know, he said it had to be. It was a severed ear. He said it had to be something that was severed from someone that had an opening, something that could bring you in.
Oh yeah, and obviously it's the opening to the mind almost. So it's kind of perfect for him for sure. But yeah, so we kind of go from this idyllic thing to you know, man, unnamed at this point, man watering his lawn, watering his flowers. What am I talking about? Washing the lawn. He's watering his plants, and you know, it begins that tension even before anything happens to him.
Yep.
You get that, like, oh, there's not enough water pressure. The water is coming out of the pipe at the other end, and he's got snagged on something. It's all the things that are annoying about using a hose pipe.
Yeah.
So you get that kind of frustration.
The pressure on the tap, that you can see it. You know, it's rattling and looks like it's ready to burst.
Yeah.
And there's you know, the fact that the hose is looped around some sort of stems or something.
Yes. Yeah.
And he's just pulling on it, and you think, you know, it's all gonna just burst.
Yeah.
And it does.
And then it does, yeah. And he kind of clutches his ear, falls over, and kind of he's obviously having some kind of attack. Yes. We see a kid come out, and the dog's having like a great time just eating the water.
Yeah, and I don't think it's an accident that he's led out holding his neck, and he's holding the hose still, you know, which is still pouring with water, and it's completely where his penis.
Well, yeah, of course, yeah.
So it's not really, you know, it's again, it's that sort of weird thing, and you've got the dog, you know, almost angrily chomping on what's coming out of the hose, and it's like, okay, you know, that's
well, and this film deals a lot with innocence, the loss of innocence, and obviously the child as well. Coming upon this is obviously very intentional, and of course, as is the bugs that we then see under the ground. So we've got this idyllic perfection, at least seemingly, but underground we have this filth, you know. And we then get the lumberjack song, which was stuck in my head again since watching it.
I only literally today.
Yeah.
When I was just going through a few notes and things, Lumberton's a real place.
I'm sure it is. Like, I'm sure it is.
I just thought, you know, it just seems like a Lynch sort of, you know, it just seems too much to be real, but it is. It's a real town. You just think, wow, that okay, sure.
Yeah. We then see Jeffrey walking through a field. Obviously, we will soon discover why he's walking through the field, but he's walking through the field and stops to pick up a rock to kind of throw it at some junk.
Yeah,
and misses.
Some sort of empty oil drums and a shed, and he
just
sort of completely misses. And think, oh, okay, sure.
Yeah.
And it's a sort of aimlessness that he has, when he's sort of walking through this field, and it's just sort of it does make me think, wow, that's the sort of thing that I would do when I was a teenager, just wandering through sort of fields and lobbing stones at things.
Yeah. But we soon find out where he's gone. He's gone to hospital to visit his dad, who obviously had some kind of incident earlier.
Yeah.
And it's a really harrowing scene.
It is.
The actor playing the dad is superb in this scene. And it's really, I mean, obviously this is the inciting incident for the loss of innocence. This is like, I'm reaching adulthood now. My dad is ill. My dad is fallible. My dad is,
it's that finding out that your dad's not immortal.
He's not going to be around forever. Oh my God. Yeah. It's all of that. But God, this guy's performance is amazing.
Reaching for that thing on his throat, isn't he? And it's and it's like he's trying to speak to his son.
He wants to say something, but he can't.
Yeah. And he's holding his hand, and you can see, Kyle MacLachlan is great in this scene too.
I think he's fantastic throughout the whole movie, but it was just the dad's performance really got to me watching this. I was like, oh my God, that's an amazing performance.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful little scene of just real pain and like you said, the loss of innocence. It's the sort of
it's the inciting incident, I think.
Yeah.
To this character's kind of loss of innocence, and then of course on the way back he passes the same shed, throws something again, and he basically decides, I'm just going to keep throwing stuff because I'm kind of, I guess, out of anger or something, frustration.
It feels very much like it's just like a frustrated sort of oh my God, this is my dad could be dying.
Yeah, absolutely. And or at least the realization that maybe as a child you thought your dad's always going to be there. You never think it's going to happen. And then, but then of course, as he's looking for rocks, he finds the ear. There is a severed ear in the grass covered in ants. Bugs are a very significant thing in this movie. Of all kinds. And of course he looks around and he's not quite sure what to do at first. He's like, what do I do with this? But he ultimately kind of thinks, well, I'll find a bag. And he finds this paper bag on the floor and picks the ear up. I definitely would have picked the ear up with the bag, not my hands.
That's why when he went to, because initially you think...
I think he was going to pick the bag, use the bag to pick it up.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. He picks it up with the other hand. I'm like, okay. That's kind of gross. But yeah, so he heads to the police station. And I can't remember why he knows Detective Williams from somewhere. He's clearly dealt with him before in the past, or maybe it's...
I think he mentions that he's a friend of his father.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he's a friend of his father's. That's right. Because he immediately says, I'm sorry, I heard your father's in hospital. And
because his father runs the hardware store.
Yes, which he now
I'm guessing
runs.
Everybody in this town knows him.
Yeah, you get the impression it's one of those towns.
Yeah,
for sure. So he goes in to see Detective Williams, and he's like, I'm a Jeffrey Beaumont, and he's like, I live near you, and he says, I believe you know my father. He works at the hardware store, and of course he says, how's he doing? I hope he's okay. And I love that response. He's like, he's okay, and then there's that pause, and he's like, I hope, where but then he's like, oh, I found an ear, and he's like, what, a human ear? And this kind of starts for me. This is such a Lynchian thing. The stilted, almost theater acting stuff. I think people either get with this or they don't, right? Because it is weird. You kind of just get used to it with his stuff.
Yeah, and his reaction is not what you would expect from a policeman. It's a sort
of... No, not at all.
It's a sort of like, oh yeah, we see this sort of thing every day, but not in a sort of weird way. It's almost comical.
Yeah, it's taken almost not seriously, isn't it? It's almost like, okay, whatever.
he almost has a sort of smirk on his face. It's a really strange.
Well, even when they see the I don't know, coroner or whoever is at the lab, they're like, oh well, we've had plenty of dead bodies in, but I can't recall anything minus an ear. You know, they're just kind of like so blasé about the whole thing. And they let Jeffrey come down and stuff. He's like, Jeffrey's just involved for some reason. But they said, you know, Jeffrey kind of says, like, is there anything you can discover from tests? He's like, well, yeah, like, obviously, what with tests, we can discover, like, blood type, gender, probably. We can work out whether they were alive when the ear was cut off or not. So yeah. And then, of course, the police then go back to the field, don't they? They cordon off the field, they search the field. And that's kind of, in theory, that should be it for Jeffrey, but
well, I think that's part of this thing is that it Jeffrey almost feels like he's a Hardy Boy or something.
Yes, exactly that.
And that was,
or at least he fancies himself as one.
Yeah. And Lynch, when Lynch was before he started the script for this, he was working on a script for something called, I think it was Ronnie Rocket, which was a sci-fi detective show, which he never made. Right. I think the script is out there, sort of thing, to read. And I think some producer said, oh, I don't want to do this, but have you got anything else? And he said, well, I had this idea about when I was younger of going into a woman's house and hiding in her closet and watching something that could lead to a murder mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what he did here. He did that. And then you've got this sort of, he is this sort of weirdly innocent Hardy Boy character that doesn't, not in the sort of the sanitized Hardy Boy novel. He ends up in a Lynch novel, you know.
Yeah.
It's taken all those things and just turned them right up.
Yeah. So we then get some great imagery. Is Jeffrey goes home, but we see him leave the light because he opens the door at the top of the stairs. And we see the light, and it's almost like he's leaving his idyllic life and descending into the darkness now. Yeah. He's seen this darker side of life, and he's now gonna, from this point on. Well, I guess the real transition is actually the wardrobe, but we can see he's starting to descend here into. This is
the sort of the beginning of
he's curious about it. He's curious about it.
It's almost like he's made the decision to go down. You know, it's the final turning point, and he's going down into the muck.
Yeah. And of course he sees his mum and his aunt, and they're very blasé. They're just like, oh, I hope you're doing all right, you know.
Yeah, and there's a thing with them as well that they always seem to be watching what look like old detective
noir kind of detective stuff. Yeah.
Which again it's that whole idea of, you know, they're safe in their little bubble, but they're watching the horrors outside. Yeah.
I love as well. So he decides to go out for a walk, and he walks past the guy with the dog. The guy with the dog. The guy is just staring at the dog. Nothing is going. They're not doing anything.
No.
And as he walks past, the guy just in the background just looks at him.
Yeah.
And it's just really weird and bizarre, and just like it's just so against everything you would do filming a movie. Like, you've purposely chosen to do this, and it is really odd. It just feels uneasy because it's so unnatural.
Yeah.
And then we get like I think it zooms into the ear then, doesn't it? But he ends up
kind of insects and the sound in this movie is
wonderful. Oh god, the sound with the pipe at the start.
Yeah.
And the light at the end, it kind of, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so Jeffrey heads over to see Detective Williams, doesn't he? He heads to the house and he says, you know, I'm Jeffrey Beaumont. Is Mr. Williams in? And of course he's welcomed in. And I think we meet his daughter here in a minute. Or does he meet? Oh no, I think he meets with him first, doesn't he? He meets with Detective Williams first. And he says, you know, he's basically come in to talk about the case. And Detective Williams is like, well, I can't talk to you about the case, buddy. Like, That's not how this works. He's like, one day when the case is all sewn up, I can tell you all about it. And it's like, I'm not sure you're supposed to even tell them, but yeah. And he says, it's just, it's not something we can talk about right now.
He sort of says, I may want you to sort of promise that you won't discuss it with anybody else.
They talk about his job as well, don't they? Because he says like, "Oh, it must be amazing." He's like, "Oh, it is, but it's horrible too." And he's
and again, the dad has this sort of weird expression on his face all the time. That sort of it's almost like he's amused by everything.
Yeah.
But also, sort of, sometimes he'll sort of frown a little.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting portrayal. I love it. It's just a weirdness that again just comes with this movie.
Yeah. So he leaves. He leaves after they have their talk, and he realizes he's not going to get told. He leaves the house, and as he leaves,
no, she's coming down the stairs, isn't she?
No, it's outside. I think they're properly outside because she comes completely out of the darkness, doesn't she? And she walk out of the darkness, and because he hears like off, he hears in the darkness, in darkness. He's like, "Are you the guy who found the ear or whatever?" Right.
And then do see. So she comes down when he goes into the father's study. I think she.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
We see her coming down the stairs. Then I think.
Yes, but she doesn't meet him. Yeah. No. So yeah, she's like, "Are you the one that found the ear?" And obviously then they're gonna go for a walk together. Now Sandy is taken, but clearly taken by him too. Or almost immediately you can see that she clearly likes him.
Yeah. And I wonder if I think Sandy is clearly the innocent in this.
The whole movie, she's the innocent.
She has these sort of this dream that we will talk about later and stuff, and she's the sort of the true innocence of the movie, but she's clearly as the whole the themes with all of these characters go on. She's clearly intrigued by him.
Yes.
And it's and he's intrigued by the other. It's that almost like this build up of obsessions.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, they discuss the case, and she says, I do hear things. I mean, my father's office is right above my room. I think she says, or next door.
She says my room's above it, and you think, oh, that is really unfortunate. That dad is not a good judge of of things. If he's got his daughter's room above his study, that's just stupid.
Yeah. And she says, well, this name keeps coming up. He says, like, there's been a couple of cases, she says, but there's this one name that just continues coming up. It's this woman singer, and she lives in this apartment that is close to his house as well, isn't it? She says, it's close to your house, and she's like, oh, it's a strange world, isn't it? Like you said, she's so innocent about things, and just like, he's the one that's then like, well, where is this apartment? And I think she mentions that they were like had her under surveillance at some point and stuff. So she obviously knows where it is. And he's like, well, what are you doing now? Do you have to go home? And she's like, well, no, not really. And he's like, well, show me where this place is then. Let's go for a walk. And yeah, so they head to the apartment. I think right outside the apartment, you get that guy, the creepy guy, who's like, "Hey, baby," and it's like already you're heading to the seedy side of
just down the road is
the end of the street is where all the evil in the world is. Your ideal fantasy ends at the end of the street. Yeah. So she shows him the street, the building. They continue walking. I think it's called Lincoln Street, isn't it?
It is Lincoln Street.
And she asks him, she's like, well, what are you going to do now? And he's like, well, I guess I got to work the hardware store, like my dad ran it and now I'm doing it. But he does say, oh, they gave me my own shifts, which I guess is the conceit they've got for the rest of the movie as to why he can just constantly not work there.
Yeah. Well, it looks like the two guys that run seem to be running the shop.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I get the feeling that his dad did as little as he does.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Like, those two definitely run the shop. One of them's blind and can still fucking, like, work the till and knows exactly what the fuck's going on, so...
Yeah. I love that bit where he says to him, where he holds up the fingers and says, how many fingers? He says, 4. And he says, I really want to know how you do that.
Yeah. I like the chat they have on the way back from the apartment, because he says, "Oh, I used to know a kid there who had the biggest tongue in the world," and she's like, "Well, what happened to him?" And he's like, "Oh, he moved away. Everyone I know has moved away. You know, he's like everyone's moving on and growing up.
Yep,
he hasn't yet."
No. I mean, that's one of the things about
because then he talks about he does the chicken walk thing.
Yeah.
Which is really childish.
Yeah.
Well,
one of the scenes that was cut out is
I don't know much about cut scenes in this, actually. So
one of the cut scenes is so he's actually at college and he's got a girlfriend, which you then in this version we never see.
No, it's never mentioned.
So he basically has this girlfriend that you can sort of tell doesn't really like him that much, and he gets the call to go from, I presume, his mother, saying that his father, and then he has to leave the college to come home, sort of thing.
Yeah,
but obviously that's completely cut out of this version.
Interesting. That would have added another dimension, but
yeah, and I think I'm kind of glad it isn't, because
me too, because it adds to the innocence at the start of the movie.
Yeah,
for sure. So anyway, Jeffrey heads to the hardware store, presumably the next day, to concoct his scheme. And there we meet the two other guys that work at the hardware store, and they do the fingers thing, as you said, which is hilarious. And he's like, "Oh hey," he's like getting all of the pest control shit together, and he's like, "Oh hey, where are those overalls?" And they're like, "Oh yeah,
same place they've been for like the last 20 years or something."
Yeah. So his plan is coming together. And it's a very childlike plan.
Yeah,
you know, it's the kind of thing that is a kid. Yes, yeah.
It's a young adult mystery novel plan.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, our thing that we'll, in a minute when we get to I'll say about him in particular, but yeah, as you said, he's got this plan to do this thing, and he meets up with.
Yeah, he basically pulls up outside of school.
Yeah.
And I love when she says to her friend, she's like, "Girls, do not tell my boyfriend. It's not what it looks like.
Don't tell Mike." And you can just see in their faces, oh, they're going to tell Mike.
Oh, God, they're going to tell Mike. And they fucking know you're full of shit, too. They could totally...
They're all wearing blue as well.
Sorry?
Did you notice they're all wearing blue?
I didn't notice that, but I'll take your word for it.
I mean, blue is clearly a theme in the whole movie.
Blue and red, yes.
Blue light is a very prominent.
Blue and red is actually, blue and red is a very common theme with Lynch in general. But yes, but yeah, I think even one of his friends says that how good looking he is. As they're leaving, she's like, "Oh, he is good looking." To be fair, yeah, he basically says, "Oh, have you ever been to Arlene's, this diner?" And I think she's like, "Of course," because you get the impression this is probably quite a small town, and like,
yeah, it's
like one diner.
Yeah,
it's like probably. So you know, he takes her for food. I think, where he takes himself for food. He takes her for a Coke. I think. I don't know if she actually eats anything. But she's like, "What? Now are you going to tell me why I'm here?" And he's like, "Well, sometimes in life it's necessary to take risks."
Yeah, it's a really weird thing he says, isn't it? It's sort of like it's like he's trying to seem older.
Yeah. It's like he's trying to seem wise and like, "Oh yeah, well, sometimes in life," it's like, "What the fuck do you know?"
Exactly,
I mean, I know you're like in your mid-20s, but you are meant to be a teenager, so you know. Yeah, so he's like, you know, just sometimes you gotta just sneak in places and hide and observe, and it's like, what are you talking about?
It's a weird place, you know.
And she's like, "Wait, you mean sneak into her apartment?" And he's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Are you fucking insane? like, what kind of plan is that?" Yeah. And she says like she's probably involved in a murder. I told you that last night. Like, what are you talking about? And then he's like, no, it's fine. because I've got this plan.
Yeah.
And the plan is, like you said, is straight out of a YA novel. It's like, yeah, I'm going to pretend to be a pest control person, and then you're going to knock on the door while I'm doing the pest controlling, and that'll distract her long enough. Because, oh yeah, she's got to be a Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah, she then has to knock on the door as a further distraction once he's inside.
Yeah, he's already inside, but this is the extra distraction.
Yeah. What? Jehovah's Witness? Sure. And he says, I've got some copies of, is it Awakening or something?
Yes, something like that, and some overalls. This
like
plan is foolproof.
The Watchtower, I guess.
Yeah.
And she sort of seemed, again, well, I mean, it's Laura Dern's beautiful performance. She has this really good way of expressing innocence, but that sort of the intrigue sort of. She doesn't really want to do it, but she wants to do it for him.
He's dangerous, and she is totally infatuated. There is no reason other than that. She's like, I want to see things through with you. Yeah. And she, it doesn't even say like, oh, this plan will work because it's so fucking stupid and such a shit plan that no one would think that someone would do this.
Yeah. It's clearly over the top, so it's going to work.
Yeah. It's going to work because it's a terrible plan. And yeah, so they head straight to the apartment, and he's like, hey, give me 3 minutes, not a minute earlier, 3 minutes. Because that he thinks is all the time he's going to need. There are so many factors that could go wrong here that he's not considering in the slightest.
And what's worse is, and this is the bit where it shows how naive and a bit thick he is.
Yeah.
Because he has to have her remind him the name and the apartment again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like she even says, "You're a bit dumb, aren't you?" You're like. The room will the name will be on the tag and
yeah, doesn't she call him Bright Boy or something?
Yeah, she calls him Bright Boy, and it's like just it's another sort of thing that just proves how naive and incompetent he is.
Yeah, I love when he wishes her luck as well.
Yeah,
and it's like, dude, I'm literally knocking on the door and pretending to be a Jehovah's Witness. You need luck, buddy. Like nothing's happening to me. I mean, Christ, like, is this such a big gamble that she would even answer the door and not just be like, oh, who the fuck is knocking on my door? I don't care.
Yeah, let alone let him in.
But I do like that by the time he gets into the building, he's already forgotten where she is because he has to look it up on the board. Like she told him 2 seconds ago. He walks in, he's like, oh, where is it? But yeah, so...
the lift is out, so he has to use the stairs.
Yeah.
And I love those stairs as well. They have that. I mean, it's obviously the way he shoots it. Lynch has this amazing ability to make the most mundane of things, like a stairway, ominous.
You're right. He does that a lot, actually, with really mundane, everyday things.
Yeah.
And sometimes really, like, I don't know, he has a way of making almost like mundane plot points kind of creepy as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like, he's very good at that.
Yeah, it's I think it's just he has the sort of thing that taps into your brain.
Yeah.
That just the sort of thing that
I think it's how off everything is.
Yeah, it's I think it's your caveman brain going, this isn't right. Maybe we should run. It's that something's not right here. And he had this amazing ability to tap into that, to sort of show you almost anything can be a danger.
Yeah.
If you're looking at it right.
So he turns up, he knocks on the door, she answers, and she says yes, and he's like, oh, I'm pest control, I need to spray this your room. And she's like, he's so lucky. Maybe this used to happen in the 50s. Maybe it does happen in apartments like this in America. Yeah. But over here, I'd be like, book an appointment, motherfucker. You don't just turn up to my door and go, you're on pest control, I'm going to spray your building. Like,
well, maybe because it's an apartment thing and it's a sort of
maybe there's something.
A super would hire
I just feel like he's very lucky.
Apartment block, so maybe it has problem with bugs and things.
I just feel like he's very lucky that he even got in the door.
Yeah. And she's very, she looks exasperated, like it's
she's pissed off because she's like, oh, that stuff stinks, and he's like, oh no, it's the new stuff. It's
a new formula, yeah.
This stuff doesn't stink at all, and he's like, really? I am not sure.
Because it's water.
yeah, probably because there's nothing in it at all. So you get that really. I love the really fucking awkward shot where she's just like left her frame. And he's just slowly spraying the whole kitchen. He's just working his way around, and it just feels so awkward the whole time because it's like he's looking around, he's trying to like sneak around. She's like not really paying attention, but occasionally glancing.
Yeah, and the thing is, that whole room it's got that specific.
It's red.
Color.
It's all red.
Sort of, that sort of I think it was described as like a womb-like room.
Oh yeah, no, I can see that.
It's also got like curves. The entrance from the door is this sort of round curved corridor that comes into the room. And the thing that always got me was when you find out that she's not on her own, she lives there with spoilers, she lives there with
we're going to get to spoilers, I wouldn't worry.
Yeah, she lives there with a husband and a son. You do sort of think, a guy who lives there as well, how?
Yeah.
I can't imagine a couple living in that room.
No, it's tiny.
Her in there on her own.
Sure, maybe a child, maybe one child.
Yeah, maybe
on her own with a child, but yeah.
And again, it all pushes in. It's like a curved sort of thing that sort of encases you in this almost claustrophobic way.
Yeah. So there's a knock at the door. It's Laura Dern. No, it's not. It is the what does he call him later? He's like the man in yellow or the yellow man. Yeah. And the man comes in and kind of almost immediately angrily looks at
like,
at Jeffrey.
This in the house,
and she's like, "Oh, it's okay. It's just the bug man." He kind of walks out. She follows, which then gives him the time to snatch keys because he saw some keys, didn't he? He's like, "Oh, steal these keys."
Hanging from a hook under the counter.
Yeah. And he keeps spraying around, and then ultimately he's like, "Oh, we're all done here. That's my job. We only spray the kitchen. It's fine. We don't have to pull the furniture out and do nothing. Just the kitchen."
The bugs would come in, but
yeah, maybe. I imagine if it was an infestation, it would be
the whole place would be done on. I imagine. Yeah.
Maybe this is a thing they do in America though. It might just be like a preventative thing that they just spray the kitchen once in a while. Maybe.
Could be.
But anyway, he heads back down the stairs, and of course that's where Sandy meets him, and she's like, "Well, I didn't have to fucking knock because as I was about to, the guy in yellow did it." And he's like, "Hey, did you get a good look at him?" And she's like, "Oh no, I only saw his back. He didn't look at me either."
No, I thought he said he got a good look at me though. I thought he said.
No. She said he only saw his back, and then he says like, "Oh, he got a good look at me. Like he definitely looked at me." But yeah, so now we have this mysterious yellow man. But yeah, so they get back to the car, and she's like, "Well, you fucked this up, didn't you?" And he's like, "No, this actually went fine. Like I got some keys."
I think she says that she sort of says that I goofed up. She says I goofed, and she's now sort of apologetic, and she almost now feels obligated to him. It's like, "Oh no, I went wrong this time, so I'm."
Oh yeah, she says she owes him one, doesn't she? She's like, "Oh yeah, I owe you one
to carry on with you now."
Yeah. This is my reason to continue to hang around with you. Yeah. But yeah, and he's like, he's like, "Well, you didn't goof, but you still owe me." And he's like, "Well, I'm going to try again tonight. We're going to sneak in tonight." And I love she really, there's that you can see, like you said, Laura Dern is such a good actress. Mm-hmm. You can see there's a moment. He's like, it's Friday. Have you got a date tonight? Yeah. And she's like, yes. But you can see she's weighing up her odds there for a minute. She's like, what do I do? But she's going to be honest because she's innocent. She's going to be honest. Yes, I do. I do have a date. And you can see Jeffrey's not happy about that.
No.
Jeffrey's like, oh, God damn it. Yeah. And he kind of drives off quite angrily. He does quickly get over it. And he is kind of like, okay, next scene, it's fine. But there's definitely something there. It's not all her. He definitely feels for her too. There's definitely something. And I think as they're driving, she's like, you really want to get involved in this, don't you? You really want to do this. And he's like, yeah, I do, He's like, well, yeah, they may be involved in murder. And it's like, well, isn't that more reason to not get involved?
Yeah.
So she's like, I don't know, it's the way it's cut, but it almost feels like in the space of 2 seconds, she's like, I have a date Friday. She's like, I'll tell him I'm sick. It's okay. I'm in. You've won me over.
And it's he says we're going to the slow club, isn't it? It's basically to watch.
Yeah, to watch the singer. And she says, like, to be clear though, I love Mike. I have to be clear about it. But yeah, they want to go. He wants to go wherever Dorothy sings, because I guess we see what his plan is. His plan is to make sure she is there singing and then bugger off to the apartment.
Yeah.
But yeah, and he's like, oh, it's okay, I'll pick you up at 8. And she's like, don't pick me up, people will see. My dad will think it's weird. And she's like, I'll walk over to you and then we'll go.
And I do like as well with the keys thing, even she sort of says, he says, oh, I got these keys, and she says, but you don't even know if they open the door.
No, and if it's her only if it's her only keys, she won't leave the fucking house because she won't be able to lock the house.
Yeah,
like there's so many things that could go wrong here. But yeah, so they head to the club. And this is the first of many. I don't know if this film was sponsored by fucking Heineken, but they talk about Heineken and beer all the time through this movie. Because here they do a cheers, and then he's like, oh, I love Heineken. And she's like, do you ever drink Heineken? And she's like, I think this is my first Heineken. Like, and it's so child's first drink.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're drinking for the first time. You're like, oh yeah, I love Heineken. I drink this all the time.
And it's also it's the idea of it's the new thing. It's the Heineken's imported and it's new, and it's because
there is an American beer thing going on through this movie.
I think she says her dad drinks
Bud, and then later is the other stuff.
Yeah, there's this, and I know there's a cut scene where Jeffrey is at a dinner with her and her parents and Mike, and they mention Bud then as well, and it is
really?
Yeah, and it feels very much like here's the traditional Bud sort of American beer, and he's the sort of no, I want to be different. I want to have the new Heineken, and you get later on when you get, Blue Ribbon.
Blue Ribbon, that's what I couldn't think of the name of that bloody beer. Yes, Blue Ribbon. Thank you.
Blue Ribbon, which I don't think I've ever had. Have you ever had Blue Ribbon?
No, I haven't, but I don't think the fact that it's got blue in the title is exactly accidental. But no, I don't know that I have had Blue Ribbon. No.
You can get it over here.
No, I was going to say I'm not sure if it comes over here. But yeah, so he's like, oh, I love Heineken. Have you never drunk Heineken before? And she's like, well, no. And she's like, my dad's a Bud drinker, So, and of course, then the host comes on, and he's like, hey, it's time for, what do they call it? Do they call it the Blue Lady?
Blue Lady.
Yeah, the Blue Lady. And so she comes on and starts singing Blue Velvet in a very sensual way. She's got this lovely, beautiful dress on, and doused in blue because the lights change to blue as she says blue. I love the way Laura Dern has that look at her and then nervous look at him. Is he checking her out? Is he checking her out? I don't know. And then they meet and she kind of has that nervous smile of like, oh, this is nice. There's so much innocence in Laura Dern in this performance. It's such a great performance.
You look at Jeffrey's face and he is completely smitten with
yes.
Dorothy. He's just eyes for Dorothy.
He barely takes his eyes off of her.
Yeah.
The only time he does is when he can feel Sandy, like
almost pleading, look at me sort of face.
Yeah, totally.
And Angelo, I'm going to ruin his name, Bagliamenti, who made the soundtrack, who's the soundtrack advisor on this. He is the piano player.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah, he's got a little cameo with the piano player behind her.
Huh.
And I must say, as much as I love Isabella Rossellini, she is not a good singer.
No.
It's not a very good version of Blue Velvet.
No, that's true. Maybe they should have mimed it like Roy Orbison later on.
Yeah, maybe. But I also think that's part of it, though, isn't it? It's like she's off.
Yeah. It's probably intentional for sure.
Yeah, and I think the crowd's obsession with her is more to do with her being than the way she's singing.
Yeah. So they leave early, obviously, and head to the apartment. And I love how now she's clearly seen that Jeffrey is infatuated with this woman.
Yeah.
Now it's a terrible idea. She's like, Jeffrey, you shouldn't do this. It's a terrible idea. Don't do it. And he's like, no, it'll be all right. It'll be all right. He's like, well, you should go home. Can you drive this car? Maybe you should go home, and I'll just go in and deal with it. And he's like, I'll just leave it at the front door for me, I'll tell you how it went in the morning. Don't worry about it. She says like, oh no, I don't want to see you tomorrow because Mike's coming over. It's almost like, no, now she's going to be like, no, I'm not sure about this.
And again, he looks, as soon as she mentions Mike, he looks crestfallen. It's like,
yeah,
somebody needs to make a fucking choice,
Yeah.
Clearly he likes her, but he's also obsessed with, Dorothy, and the whole sort of like, oh, but, maybe he doesn't want her, but he doesn't want somebody else to have her either.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
I like, she then says like, right, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to honk the horn 4 times. Because you're a fucking idiot, I'm going to show you 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4.
It really does feel like that, doesn't it? It really does feel like she's explaining it to a child.
Yeah. Well, he is pretty fucking thick. So, but yeah, she's like, I'll let you know that she's on her way up, and then that way you'll have time to hide somewhere. Yeah. And even she says, she's like, I don't know if you're a detective or a pervert.
Yes.
Like, I'm not sure which you are.
I don't know if you're a detective or a pervert.
And he kind of smiles at that.
Yeah,
he's kind of okay with it.
Like, what? You can't be both?
Yeah, well. But yeah, it's clear that Sandy is totally infatuated now and totally torn.
Hook, line, and sinker.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, Jeffrey is going to head in anyway. He heads up the stairs, and luck of all luck, it was the keys to the apartment. So it's all right. He got in. So he gets into the apartment and starts kind of fumbling around in the dark. He does have a longing look into her bedroom. Mm-hmm. Again, red bed sheets and
messy bed and the sort of, and then he notices that there's a room with a cot in it.
Yeah, a child's hat and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, clearly a child's room. So then
of course he needs to pee
because of the Heineken, man.
Yeah, and it's literally, he says Heineken.
Yes, yeah. But of course he coincides. Sandy beeps the horn. as he's flushing, so he doesn't hear it over the flush. And yeah, he continues kind of looking around. He looks at her like bathing stuff, like all of the, I guess, body lotions and things. He starts kind of like looking around at all of her things, in a very pervy kind of way. But then of course he hears the door and he hides in the wardrobe. And the way the movie kind of frames this, it does very much feel like the wardrobe is the gateway, because he ends in the wardrobe as well, and then life goes back to being okay again at the end. But it is kind of leaving the wardrobe or getting in the wardrobe is the thing.
It's almost like the wardrobe, because almost every time you're in this place, you're almost always from that. You're almost always from the wardrobe.
Yeah, that's true.
It's almost that's where we are. We're all here.
Yeah.
We're all Jeffrey. It's that whole we're the audience for this terrible thing that's gonna go down,
Yeah.
We're all part of it.
So Dorothy comes home and takes off her dress.
The yellow man that drops her off, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. And of course Jeffrey then is now like, yeah, actually, now you mention it, I am more pervert than detective. I think you're right. But of course she gets a phone call from Frank, unseen Frank, and it's a very weird conversation. She's like, sir, she calls him sir and master, and she wants to speak to Don. Is little Donnie all right? And she asks if he's there with you, and you can tell she's very distressed and concerned about someone. And they're talking about a place. I think they talk about Meadow Lane, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yeah, she's like, yeah, I know. I'll be sweet. I'll be nice. And yeah, so she's clearly at this point, I think, doesn't Jeffrey then suspect? He's like, well, I guess she's her son or whatever has been kidnapped, and her husband, and that's why this is a whole thing.
And there's a wonderful shot of Dorothy gets that she's all she's wearing at this point is her pants, and she gets down in this weird sort of hunched over position.
She goes to get the picture, doesn't she, from under the sofa, and then she kind of almost. It's almost like she's kissing the ground or crying into the ground.
Yeah, and she sort of smooths this because you don't quite see what it is that she takes out at first.
No,
it looks like it's a picture. It looks like it's a framed picture. You're not quite sure, and she's sort of smoothing it, and she quickly puts it back.
Yeah, and then she takes the wig off.
Yeah.
And then of course we get the real long shot where she's just in that left of frame in the bathroom. As she undresses, and of course it's the other thing as well. Like Jeffrey is then expectantly waiting. He's waiting to see what happens. But of course she comes back to the wardrobe, so he has to hide again. Further back as she grabs the blue velvet. She
puts her hand in and gets the dress.
Yes, yeah. Which is blue.
Blue velvet.
Literally blue velvet, yeah. Now, unfortunately, Jeffrey knocks a hanger and it falls down. She is clearly very suspicious of the people in her life, because I probably wouldn't have thought twice about this. I would have just been like, yeah, hanger fell down because I've just literally 1 second ago been in the wardrobe and I've disturbed something. She grabs a fucking knife. She's like, I am taking no chances. And so she she approaches with a knife and just grabs the door open. She's like, get the fuck out of there. What are you doing? And she's like, yeah, put your hands up. And she tells him to get on his knees. And she's like, what are you doing? Why are you here? And he was like, oh no, she asked him what his name is. And she says, oh, Jeffrey. And he says, oh, Jeffrey nothing. And she's like, yeah, give me your wallet. That's not going to fly.
Yeah.
So of course she sees his wallet, she gets his name, and she says, what are you doing here? And he says, I wanted to see you. And she's like, you wanted to see me? Are you fucking joking? She's like, I've seen you before. And she's like, yeah. He's like, oh, yeah, I sprayed your apartment. And she says, what did you see tonight? And he says, well, I saw you come in and I saw you talk on the phone. And I saw you get undressed. And she's like, you sneak into girls' apartments to see them get undressed?
Yeah.
And she smiles about it. And then she's like, right, okay, you get undressed. She's like, I want to see you. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I guess I'll leave. And she's like, no goddamn way. Get undressed now.
She jabs him in the face with the knife.
Yeah, she does. It's like the smallest cut from the biggest knife.
Yeah. Just a little prick.
Just a little prick, yes. So yeah, she gets him he strips down to his boxers and she's like, stand up. And obviously he thinks he's gonna get away with that. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
So she basically tells him, it's her actually. She takes the boxers, doesn't she? She takes the boxers.
She gets down on her knees and she starts kissing his stomach.
Yes.
And she pulls his pants down.
And she's like, do you like that? Do you like that? But then interspersed with, don't you fucking move, I'll kill you.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's really awkward.
And I think this is the sort of the point where it feels to me very much like she has power here.
Oh God, yeah.
It feels like the first time for her she's been able to get one over on somebody else.
Yeah, she can be dominant here. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And well, I mean, it's that sort of that cycle of violence thing, isn't it? It's the sort of, she's had it for so long that now she kind of wants it for herself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In a way.
So she takes him over to the couch, still knife in hand, of course, and starts kissing him when there's a knock on the door.
Yeah. And
she tells him to shut up. She's like, shut up and go in the closet.
Get back in the closet. Yeah.
And luckily, the person that comes to the door isn't like, who did you just tell to shut up?
Yeah.
It's like, no, I guess it's soundproof walls. It's fine. So he gets back in the closet with his clothes. She hides the knife by the radiator, I think, and it kind of falls behind the radiator.
I think it slides over and falls sort of underneath it.
So of course now it's Frank. It's Dennis Hopper, who is just fucking dialed to 11 this whole movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's no sort of cool here. There is
God, no. He is like 100% on 100% of the time.
And it's every moment.
Yep.
Something awful could happen. There's never a moment. There's never a safe moment when he's around.
No, never.
You are constantly aware that this guy could do anything at any time.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah. I mean, he walks in and she's like, Frank, and he's like, shut up, it's Daddy. Where's my bourbon?
Yeah, where's my fucking bourbon? The light and stuff.
Yeah.
And she puts out the light and she lights a candle.
Yeah.
And he says for the first time, because he says it a number of times, now it's dark.
Yes. Yeah.
And just the way his delivery of that line is like, whoa, what the fuck does that mean?
Uh-huh.
That it's like it's said with so much meaning that you're like, oh, that can't be good.
No. So he sits down with his bourbon and then almost immediately tells her to spread her legs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such an uncomfortable scene. It's like wider.
Horrible.
Yeah, it's so awful.
And also, so this was their first scene together.
Yeah.
And he didn't know that she was going to be naked underneath that dress.
Yeah.
So he comes in. He tells her to widen her legs. She widens her legs, and immediately she's there for him. And of course, he just goes with it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, acting wise, not just.
Yeah.
It's like one of those times where I guess you just go, well, this is it.
Well, he does his drugs first.
Yeah.
He gets his gas mask thing out and starts doing his drugs.
Canister of now. So initially it was going to be helium,
right?
And I don't. It's one of those times where I'm in two minds about it. Now, would it have spoiled the scene if he had this really weird?
I think it would have.
That made him sound like the cartoon judge.
I mean, I don't know, because then he is saying stuff like "mummy," and it would have been really fucking weird.
And that's the other thing. Would it have been even worse?
It might have made it worse. Yeah, I don't know.
And I think Hopper himself suggested that it should be animal nitrate.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's supposed to be animal nitrate that he's stuffing.
Yeah, because I don't think they ever identify it. It's just a thing that he does.
I think I always presumed it was something like ether or something.
Yeah.
But according to Hopper, he's as far as he's concerned, it's animal nitrate.
Fair. So the horribly uncomfortable scene. He's like, "Mummy," and she's like, "Mummy loves you," and he's like, "Oh, baby wants to fuck," and it's like, oh my god.
And it's the way he roars it.
Yeah, he's god. Dennis Hopper can do fucking deranged so well.
Don't fucking look at me.
Yeah, he hits her as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, and again, I think it's another thing. It's that cycle of violence thing. I think it's also it feels very much like this probably happened to him.
Yeah.
Or something in him triggered this.
Yeah.
And it clearly fucking sent him over the edge, you know?
Mm. Now, of course, he says, I want blue velvet.
Mm-hmm.
Which is clearly why she's wearing this.
Yeah.
After the phone call, she knew.
Yeah.
That's what she's to wear for when he comes over. But yeah, a really, really uncomfortable scene. And
they have this thing where I think it's the belt, isn't it? It's the blue velvet belt that she's got.
He puts it in his mouth, doesn't he?
She puts it in his mouth.
Oh, does she?
And I think she puts the other end in her own mouth.
Mm.
And there's that uncomfortable sort of moaning and of him, you know, swabbing at this piece of blue velvet. And that with the sort of weird moaning he's making, and the baby and the daddy and the
so creepy.
It's a horrible, uncomfortable scene that is just perfectly done.
Oh, the intended feeling is masterfully communicated. Yeah. It feels so horrible and uncomfortable.
And I know they filmed more. I mean, I know
sure.
There's a more graphic version out there somewhere.
I don't think we need that. This is more than enough.
I agree. I don't think you need a more graphic version because it's pretty graphic enough.
Yeah, I think so.
And apparently, when Lynch was filming it, he was laughing. He found it hilarious.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And Rossellini said that she couldn't understand it at the time, but apparently now, whenever she sees it, she laughs.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
How strange! I've never laughed at that. I've always thought it's really awkward and horrible. But of course, after the deed is done, he immediately says, "Now it's dark."
Yeah,
it's dark or darker. Doesn't he say now it's darker?
Yeah, I think so.
All while Jeffrey was watching.
And the thing about it is you, while he's hitting her and raping her, you do get the feeling that she is getting some enjoyment out of it.
There are moments where she smiles.
Yeah.
But moments where she's clearly very uncomfortable. It's.
Yeah. There is that sort of, again, like I said, it's that whole sort of cycle of violence thing that, you know.
Yeah.
It's the getting used to something thing that you shouldn't be getting used to, you know?
Yeah. Well, he tells her to stay alive, and then he leaves.
Yeah.
Leaving her, obviously, clutching herself on the floor. Jeffrey emerges somewhat cautiously, I guess, because he might not have completely left. And then he carefully approaches her, and he, he says, you know, are you okay? You know, like, why don't you lie down? And, you know,
he sort of startles her, doesn't it? Because I think she'd forgotten he was there.
Yeah, I mean, a fucking lot's happened in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And of course he takes her to the couch, and he goes to cover her with like a blanket. She's like, no, I don't like that. Mm-hmm. And he asks if she's okay, and she says she's something like, yeah, I'm all right, I think. And she's obviously exhausted, and he says, well, I guess I'll go then. But then she turns around and she's like, Don, no. And of course, Don is like her son, right? Or we believe.
Is Don her son or Don or her husband?
Or one or the other. I'm not quite sure. And of course, she embraces him. She grabs him. She's like, Don, don't leave me. And she's like, oh, you're back. And yeah, I mean, she's clearly like in shock and just completely, completely out of it. And of course, you can kind of tell Jeffrey is kind of in two minds. Because of course she then gets her breast out, doesn't she? She's like, can you see my breast? And he's like, you can feel it, and
and you can see that he's horrified but also completely intrigued.
Yeah
Again, McLaughlin does an amazing job of.
I think they both do in these scenes. But yeah, she's like, oh, do you like the way it makes you feel? And he's like, yes. And it's all very like first timey for him, in that kind of like, But then of course, she tells him to hit her. And he refuses. And she kind of walks away from him. So he basically follows her. And she goes to the bathroom, and he's like, right, I'm leaving now.
Yeah.
This has got too weird, even for me.
Yep. Like sanity prevails.
Yeah. But of course she's in the bathroom saying like, Don, help me, Don, and he's like, no, this is too much. He does, though, before he leaves, he goes back to the sofa to find the picture.
Yeah.
And it's the picture of a guy and a kid with the hat that he's already seen. And in the back is a certificate of marriage.
Yeah. Officiated by David Lynch.
Oh, really? I didn't catch that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So he heads off. He heads outside and leaves the apartment. Completely bathed in black. But you do get that real bright light kind of shines on his face at the end, almost like he's had an awakening. He's like,
it's that whole, wow, the world is just opened up.
Yeah.
He's seen things, man.
Yeah. And he kind of almost like has those dreams of Frank and her and that whole event.
And there's a sort of an odd. You get this very vague picture of his dad's face.
It's like stretched, isn't it? It's all like stretched and warped.
And then it sort of morphs into Frank roaring. And then he wakes up.
Yeah. So
you get that other reoccurring picture as well of the candle being blown out.
Yes. So the next day, Jeffrey's working the hardware store and phones Sandy. Says, "Oh, can you talk?" And she's like, Mike's here right now. Probably not. And I think we get the guy who's like buying a new axe.
Yeah. Lumberjack dude
with a pipe. Yeah.
Again, it's that whole sort of mundane life just goes on around everything.
Yes, absolutely.
Just normal, just a guy in a shop buying an axe. Nothing weird here.
Yeah, absolutely. So of course he agrees, Sandy agrees to meet up later on. She picks him up this time, and they park up outside of church.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, what do you want to tell me? And he's like, it's a strange world, Sandy. Let me tell you. He's like, his life has just gone from this complete innocence to like, oh my God, holy shit, the stuff I've seen. And he basically tells her what he thinks is going on. She has a son. She has a husband. This guy, Frank, has kidnapped them, and he's forcing Dorothy to do things for him. And he also says, like, I think she wants to die. And he believes that Frank cut the ear that they found.
Yeah.
He found, sorry, not that they found. But yeah, and he says, I think this Frank is a really dangerous man.
Do you think?
Yeah. So of course, Sandy is quite logically like, probably should tell my father.
Yeah.
But of course he says, well, I can't prove anything. I don't have any information. Anything
I have obtained is illegal.
Yeah. So it's almost that like it's almost that addict thing of like, oh, I guess I have to keep doing this until I find some evidence.
Yeah. Don't take it away from me.
Yeah. I can stop. Don't bring logic into this. I can't.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really great scene, and yeah, I like Laura Dern's performance in this. I'd forgotten how great she was in this movie, if I'm honest. And
I think that's the thing is you kind of overlook her performance because everything else
because of everything else. Yeah,
everything else that's going 100%. On around Laura Dern is so big and so over the top that there are some really delicate moments with her that you sort of forget about. Yeah.
So she then talks about her dream, which I think you wanted to pick up on, about the robins.
Yeah, she has this. It's a childlike dream that she has. There's this sort of.
But it's great because it's referenced at the end, and I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and she says that the world was like as ours, but it was dark. It was in darkness, and there was no love. But then she said, "There's the robins came. The robins came, and it was like the robins were light.
Yeah,
they brought their light with them, and I knew everything was going to be okay."
Mm. And I like he smiles. He's like it's almost like he's remembering that innocence that he had before yesterday. Yeah. He's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, but it also I think he has that sort of expression that sort of says, "Oh, you sweet thing,"
Yeah, like, doesn't he say like you're a neat girl or something? He's like, "Oh, you neat girl."
It's almost not quite disdain, but he says it in a sort of in a way that just makes her sound silly. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
But then of course I think she says I love you, doesn't she?
Yeah. And then awkwardly says, "Well, I guess we better go."
Yeah.
And so they do. They drive off. And of course, there's really no doubt as to where Jeffrey's going to end up going. He goes pretty much, I'm assuming, straight to Dorothy's apartment.
Yep.
Knocks on the door.
Dropped off one girlfriend, wants to go see his next one.
Pretty much. And he says, "Hey, can I come in?" And she's like, "Well, yeah, but hurry. Don't be, he's she's, oh no, that's right, because he comes in, but before he can say anything, she's like, "I looked for you in my closet."
Yes.
She's like, "You weren't there." It's like, that's crazy. But she says, "Oh, I like you." And he's like, "Oh no, it's not crazy. I like you too. It's fine." She's like so good with the mad eyes in these scenes. Like she's properly like out of her mind.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey is clearly willing to take advantage or continue.
Yep.
And yeah, so that's pretty much the end of that scene. I think it cuts to the red curtains as they're obviously, you know, going to have sex or something.
Yeah.
And we then cut to the bar, which I cannot remember the goddamn name of, the club where she sings. Slow Club, thank you. And he's drinking his Heineken and watching her.
Yep.
And yeah, but of course he sees in the audience, he sees Frank and Frank's goons.
Yeah.
Including Stephen Dorff.
Yes. And oh bloody hell, Jack Nance as well, which Jack Nance is really weird in this movie. I mean, not that he's not weird in most of the things.
Yeah.
He's got there's this thing with him when he turns up. I'm sure he turns up at the very end with his dad.
Maybe.
It's an odd thing. Maybe I was misseeing it, but I don't know. Well, you know, we'll get to the weirdness in a bit, but yeah, Frank is sat there and he's bathed in the blue light and he's mouthing the words to the song that, you know, the Blue Velvet.
He's holding the belt as well, right?
Yeah, he's got that. Well, it's not the belt. So you see it when I think Jeffrey's looking through the wardrobe at one point that he's cut off a square from the hem of the dress,
right?
And that's what he's holding. He's holding this square that he's cut off at the bottom.
Okay. But yeah, I think this is the first time we see Brad Dourif, right?
I think so.
I think. But yeah, so anyway, he basically decides to follow Frank, doesn't he? Because he sees them leave, and he decides he's going to follow them too to see basically where they are hanging out or where he lives or what the deal is.
Yeah, get all the junior detective stuff.
Yeah, why not?
Sort of the camera in the shoebox that opens.
Yes,
when he presses the shutter and stuff.
Yeah.
So when you see, there's that really cool shot of when he's been watching Frank overnight. And
yeah, because he ends up at this warehouse factory, doesn't he?
Yeah, and you get this really cool shot of the Heineken bottle on the dashboard.
Yes, yeah.
It pulls out, and you've got these like empty and half empty crisp packets and
banana peel and fuck knows what. Yeah.
Yeah, and you pull back, and then he's still awake. He's been up all night, and he's got that intense sort of stare on his face, and as he's watching, he's looking for more of what's going on.
Yeah,
it's a really cool shot.
Yeah. So the next day, Sandy is watching Mike practice, and Jeffrey pulls up and stops in front of her. She's like, "Keep going, Mike's looking at me," but it's too late. She's like, "Oh fuck it, it's too late now."
Yeah, so he's seen it. Never mind.
Yeah. And he's like, "Oh, should I talk to him?" And she's like, "I don't think that's going to do much good. Just fucking drive."
Yeah.
like he's clearly like the big jock dude. This is not going to go well.
Shall I talk to the huge jock in the bright red jersey?
Yeah, totally.
Probably not a good idea.
So instead, they go to the diner, and Jeffrey eats in front of her again.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, she's effectively at this point, she's like, okay, I've kind of made my lot now. You know, the decision's made. She got in the car with him in front of Mike. But he basically says, "Hey, I've my investigation's going well. I've followed Frank and I found the Yellow Man, and went into the building with Frank laughing together, and they were both watching Dorothy that night."
And he also mentions this. He also sees that the Yellow Man met a well-dressed man.
Yes. But he says, "Well, what does that prove? It doesn't prove anything."
Yeah, and I do love the well-dressed man. And I mean, let's be serious here. At any point did you go, "Well, that's not somebody else. That's just Frank"?
Yeah. But I guess you could say he was very tired, having been up all night.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is clearly Dennis Hopper in a wig and a mustache.
And a mustache.
Yeah. But yeah, so he says, you know, doesn't he say that in the distance he saw this murder or something, and there was a woman with a broken leg, and
yeah, something like that.
Because you got the guy hanging out the window, right? Like he's been like thrown out the window, and he's just hanging out the window.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's like basically like, oh well, this maybe proves he's a criminal, right? I mean, like maybe something happened in the distance where he was. But she's like, where are you even going with all of this stuff? And he's like, well, I don't know. And she's like, You're not going back to the fucking apartment, are you? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, Jeffrey, why would you do this? He says like, he says something like, I'm seeing something that was always hidden.
Yeah.
Something like that. And you know, and then he kind of follows up with like, you know, I'm solving this crime. I'm involved in a mystery. And she's like, oh, you like the mystery, don't you? And he says, you're a mystery. And yeah, so you can tell he is kind of torn between the two, but he clearly favors the danger.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the part of him that is I guess, you know, the pure part of him longs for Sandy.
Yes,
it's the
you'll have a happier life.
Yeah, it's the thing. It's the all things we're supposed to want, isn't it? It's the whole, you know,
white picket fence. Yes,
the beautiful idyllic picture for you. But there's this other bit. There's just there's so much there. There's so much that I haven't seen yet, and I want to be part of this world too. I want to see what comes next, isn't it? It's that.
Yeah. But he moves over to her side of the table and kisses her. And she does quite happily go along with it briefly. And then she's like, oh, Jeffrey, please don't. Like this is, you know, this is a bad idea. She says that, you know, she worries. She worries about things. She's worried, and she says she's worried that she got him into this. It's like, I'm pretty sure he got himself into this.
Yeah, I don't think you need to worry about that.
No, it definitely wasn't you, Sandy. Like the reason he saw you was because he went to his dad's.
I mean, I guess you could argue that
she did go along with it. Yes.
She did tell him about Dorothy.
Oh, that's true. No, she did kind of tell him stuff he wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
That is a fair point. It wouldn't have gone any further if she hadn't said anything. That's a fair argument.
It would have been harder for him to find stuff out, you know.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess in a lot of ways she did kind of facilitate this. But of course he heads back to the apartment to see Dorothy. She's got Blue Velvet playing, of course.
Yeah.
And
I think at this point we've now really established that they are in a relationship.
Oh God, yes.
And he is, and it is a sadomasochistic relationship. He is now hitting her because she's asked for it.
Well, yeah. Previously, she asked, and he said he was leaving.
Yeah.
I think it's in this scene where she tells him to hit her, and he does.
Yeah.
And because he kind of resists it first, doesn't he? Because she's like, "Are you a bad boy?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "Do you want to do bad things?" And she's like, "Yeah, hit me." And he kind of says, "Oh, I want to help you" at first, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And
when he won't do it, she sort of pulls away from him, and it's that spurs him on. That's what, you know. Well,
she also he also suggests that she goes to the police, right? And she's like, "No, not the police, no police." And and she says, "You know, get away, you know, stay away from me." And then he hits her. And then as you said, it's now clearly become a sadomasochistic kind of abusive relationship. She then says I now I have your disease in me, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or you've put your disease in me, something like that. Sorry, were you going to say something then? Sorry.
No, I'm just saying, you know, we're going to sort of reiterate that it's almost like he's now taking over. He's taking Frank's place in that.
Yeah, he is. Yeah,
it's that the
absolutely
moving up sort of thing.
Yeah. The later that night or the following day, he's playing with the hat, and she kind of comes rushing in and grabs it off of him.
Yeah.
She doesn't want him touching that. She's like, oh, this brings
that's the pure part of her life.
Yes, exactly. She's like, this is
touched by anything that's going on around it.
Yeah. He says he should probably go. She says, I want you to stay. And don't hate me. I'm not crazy. She says, like, I know the difference between wrong and right. And he's like, well, that's good.
Yeah. Should.
And she says, yeah, you're my special friend. And she says, yeah, I still have you inside of me. It helps me. And yeah, he says, like, well, look, I'll call you.
Yeah, I'll call you.
Yeah. But of course, as they leave, it's Dennis fucking Hopper. Frank comes around the corner and is like, "Ah, fucker! Who the fuck are you?"
Yeah.
She says, "Oh, he's a friend. He's from the apartment or from the neighborhood, I think."
Yeah, it's from the neighborhood.
She says, "Oh, we were just talking," and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm sure. You're from the neighborhood." And he says, I think you should. He's like, oh yeah, what's your name, neighbor? And he says, oh, Jeffrey. She says, oh, he's a good kid, and he's just immediately like, shut the fuck up. He's so abusive in this. He's such a horrible bastard.
Yeah.
And he says to Jeffrey, he's like, hey, do you want to take a ride? And he's like, no, thanks. And he's like, well, no thanks. What does no thanks mean? And he's like, I don't want to go. He's like, go where? Go for a ride. And he's like, oh, you want to go for a ride? Cool, get in the car. He's like, a ride, great idea. So him and his kind of goons basically drag him to the car. They tell her to bring her dress or whatever and come with them. And off they speed in their I don't know, some kind of muscle car, isn't it? It's the bad boy car.
It's a Dodge Charger, I think, isn't it?
Is it a Charger? It might be.
It's either a Charger or a Challenger, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. But it's the bad boy car. He's been driving around in the kind of more traditional classic red. I don't know cars very well, but
I don't remember what it is, but yeah.
But yes, so they drive around now. He's hanging out with the adults.
Yeah.
He's hanging out with the bad boys, and they ask him if he's ever been to Pussy Heaven, and
yeah.
And I like when Frank's like, what did he say? And he's like, no, Frank, he hasn't gone to Pussy Heaven. This is where we established he has a police radio.
Yeah.
Because they're listening in. And yeah, so he's I think doesn't Brad pull out a knife? I forget his character's name, by the way. He pulls a knife.
Raymond,
that's right. Yeah. And so they take him to this other seedy club bar place.
Well, brothel.
Is it a brothel? Yeah, probably a brothel.
Yeah, with like the sort of the tiredest, oldest prostitutes that you've ever seen. They're all sort of a shape, and these are not the sort of the beautiful women that you expect at a brothel.
No, it's almost like a Western brothel.
Yeah. And we're introduced to Ben, who he's an amazing character.
He's my favorite scene is him singing Roy Orbison.
Yeah,
I think it's fucking wonderful scene. It's so good. It's so awkward and horrible and uncomfortable. It's brilliant.
I love the character of Ben. He's got this sort of almost sort of Noel Cowardy thing about him. He's got that sort of the cigarette holder and he has those sort of those effeminate glances, and he's got the makeup on, and he just sort of looks like this sort of Noel Coward character that that has, you know, the decadence of his character, who seems to be running this brothel and seems to be holding Frank's money.
Yeah.
And I the sort of they have that. Oh, you also get the thing with the beer. And Frank says to get beers, and he says, "Do you like beer?" to him, and he says, "Yeah." He says, "What beer do you like?" He says, "Heineken." And he says, "Fucking Heineken." And he says, "No, it's Paris Blue Ribbon." And you get this sort of, you know, the introduction of Ben's character while he's sort of like, you know, almost lounging back on against the wall, and it's such a weird and brilliant portrayal of this brothel owner.
You get that guy as well, the guy who comes up to Jeffrey and he's like, "I'm Paul. What's your name?" He's like, "Jeffrey," and he just gives him that nod.
Yeah,
that kind of
like the Jack Nance, isn't it? That's
That's
go. It's so weird that because they're sort of baiting him and sort of making fun of him and stuff, but he keeps sort of wandering away and wandering up to him.
Yeah,
and he sort of he sort of says things, and then he sort of nods his head and he'll wander off again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, so they start drinking their beers.
Yeah, and again you get Frank saying, "Where's the fucking glasses?" And
yeah,
Ben's like, "Where are the glasses, darling?" And she comes in with these glasses. He's like, "I fucking hate warm beer."
Yeah.
And of course Ben sort of wanders over to Jeffrey, and he's sort of like, isn't he great? Isn't he wonderful? And he's like, "Yes, he's great." And then Ben punches him in the stomach.
Yeah. Well, doesn't Frank do it first, and then Ben does it because Frank goes up to him. He's like, "I can make him do anything I want."
And I like the way Frank hits him as well. It's that coiled thing.
Yeah.
Sort of it's almost like a casual, quick jab that he hits.
Yeah.
You don't see it coming quite. Just wham, hits him.
Yeah. So Frank kind of disappears off a little bit just to get some money. There's some money exchanging, as you said.
Yeah, and again, the mannered way that Ben gives him the money, and then he gives him this list.
Yes.
And then Frank opens his mouth and he pops in a little pill of something.
Yeah.
It's like clearly they have a fucking weird relationship going on here. That this is the way it's done is like this is what happens every time. It's like money, list, pill.
Yeah. And finally they say that Dorothy's allowed to see her kid.
Yeah.
Which she's delighted about, obviously. Heads in and you can hear through the door she's like screaming Donnie, and then oh no, like Mama loves you.
Mommy loves you, and you almost feel like there's some sort of rejection going on. Because she's terrified of
yeah.
You know, I guess the kid's not hugging her like she wants to, you know.
Yeah. And then we get, I think, probably the best scene of the movie, with the singing to Roy Orbison with the stage light in the hand as a microphone.
Yeah.
Amazing. It just
Frank says, he gets that tape out. And he says the candy colored client they call the Sandman, and he gives it to Ben.
Yeah.
And they put it on. Then apparently Lynch wanted this song, and Roy Orbison was approached, and Roy Orbison said no.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. But they found some sort of loophole.
Oh.
So they got to use it anyway. And then apparently later, Roy Orbison saw it and was like, actually, I love this. I'm glad you used it. And then I think they re-released it, and he filmed a video with scenes from...
Oh, really? I didn't know they did that.
Yeah. And I love it. And apparently Lynch saw Stockwell just playing with the light between takes, and he thought it made such a striking image that he said, we'll use that, we'll do that. And it's such a weirdly haunting, like, horrible and beautiful thing at the same time. It's just this sort of almost like it feels like he's this weird decadent lounge singer singing into this sort of glowing microphone, but he's not really singing, and it's just the lyrics match perfectly with what, you know, the whole "In Dreams You're Mine" all the time and all that sort of stuff. And
Frank's reaction to "In Dreams You're Mine," the idea that you may have some free will in your dreams away from Frank, and that immediately angers him. Of course, he immediately turns it off at that point. You basically say, "Wait, right, we're leaving. Does anyone else want to come for a joyride?"
Yeah. And then all the women there, no one really reacts. They all have just completely blank expressions.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think one of the prostitutes does want to go with Raymond, so she comes.
Yeah.
But no one else wants to.
Yeah. And so they leave, and he says, "Well, you know, I'll see you Tuesday." And he looks at the cash, and he's like, "Now it's dark again."
Yeah. And you get that cut of they literally disappear from the roof.
Yeah, it's such a weird cut, isn't it? He's like, "Oh, fuck everything that moves," and starts laughing, and then just blink, gone, and it's just empty room.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get the driving in the dark montage.
And it's such an eerie thing of them driving through this the town.
And you've got the two having sex in the back as well, right next to him, and it's just really, really awkward.
Everybody's squished in, and you know, it's all uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And the light is this beautiful light that's sort of, you know, coming in through the windows, and it's all low down, and the thing about that whole scene is, that film was seen just in the car with people rocking the car. They're not driving, and there were people with lights on their heads running past,
right,
to make it look like they're driving along. It's like, just what a weird, even just that, you know, stuff is just brilliant.
Yeah, it's genius and just bizarre. But of course Frank pulls over and he's like, "You, what the fuck are you looking at?" He's like, "Don't you ever look at me." And
he starts basically pouring it.
Yeah, well, he does more of the drugs, doesn't he? And then he starts basically molesting her in front of him, as almost a power thing at that point, just to be like, I can do what I want in front of you. And
Jeffrey finds some balls.
Yeah.
Why don't you leave her alone?
Yeah. And Frank hates it.
Yeah.
Frank hits the roof that someone stood up to him.
Clearly no one's fucking talked to Frank like that before.
No.
Certainly nobody's lived.
No, exactly. So he gives him over to Raymond, did you say his name was?
Mm-hmm.
Who basically holds him with a knife to his throat. Frank basically starts beating the crap out of him.
Again, you get that it's the sort of the weird build up to this. It's sort of, he puts the tape on again.
Yes. And
then the prostitute, she climbs out of the car and she just starts dancing on the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And it just adds to the weirdness of the scene. And Frank, they've got him, they've got Jeffrey there holding Jeffrey, and Frank starts again singing along to the song, and he says to him about, "I'm going to send you a love letter," and he puts lipstick on and he kisses him.
Yeah.
He leaves these lipstick marks on Jeffrey's face. He keeps kissing him, and he says, "You know what a fucking love letter is? I'm going to send you a love letter." And he says, "A love letter is a bullet straight from a gun," and I'm going to fuck you.
You're fucked forever or something. Yeah.
Yeah. If you get a love letter from me, that's it. You're fucked forever. And he kind of tells him that he's not going to kill him. They're going to fuck him up.
Yeah, they're going to make him wish he was dead, but yeah.
Yeah. And he does. He says those things to him. He says that in dreams you're mine all of the time.
Yeah. Even in your dreams.
Yeah.
You can't escape his abuse.
Yeah. and then they basically beat him unconscious.
Yeah, as Dorothy kind of screams. Dorothy, by the way, I'm sure a Wizard of Oz reference. I'm sure that wasn't.
Oh, absolutely, completely. She's most definitely a Judy Garland sort of avatar almost. You know, there's so many sort of allusions to that whole Wizard of Oz thing. You know, the colors and the things that are going on. Yeah, it's not an accident.
No. I don't think anything in this film is an accident, to be honest. No. But yeah, so they beat the crap out of him as the hooker dances on the car. So I guess it's the next morning. He wakes up on the ground, having been like pummeled into the earth.
Yeah.
I think he's woken up by the rain, isn't he? Because now it's all raining and horrible. And he kind of wanders home, battered and bruised. He then, I think he when he gets home, he's still thinking about Dorothy, isn't he? And thinking about Dorothy saying like "hit me" and stuff. And obviously now he's been hit, so I guess he's not so happy about it. But yeah, he does have this moment of breaking down, doesn't he? As he thinks about everything, this ridiculous darkness that's enveloped his life.
It's become real now, isn't it?
There's consequences to his actions.
Yeah, it's not just a little detective game anymore.
No, exactly. And so he calls Sandy again, and he says, I know things that could help your father, but it might get you in trouble. And he basically says, look, I promise I won't mention you. I'll she's like, oh, it doesn't matter. Do what you need to do. And he's like, look, I'll see you Friday, if not before. But basically he's going to go to Sandy's father with what he knows. First, I think he goes down for breakfast, and you get that scene where his auntie and stuff are just looking at him like, what the fuck? And he's like, I don't want to talk about it. And it's such a teenager-y thing.
Yeah.
Where the parents trying to help, and he's like, oh, you don't know anything. Just I don't want to talk about it.
And I do think this is where I think we would have benefited a bit more from some scenes with his
because they are only really like right at the end, right at the start, and then this scene, I think.
Yeah, and I know there are whole scenes cut that with them. But there's that bit where he says he's going out or something, and his aunt says, oh no, you shouldn't do this or something. And she sort of goes, and he says, is she Aunt Alice?
Something like that.
I can't remember what.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And he says, Aunt, sort of, I love you.
Yeah,
you're gonna get it.
Oh,
hello.
Yeah,
that's and I think that's why you would have benefited more from the getting to know them a little bit better.
Sure. Yeah.
That sort of, because I'm sure that should have been more jarring.
Yeah.
It is jarring.
It is.
But I think it could have been more jarring if we'd have known a bit more about them.
So Jeffrey heads to the police station, and as he's walking through, he sees the yellow man who's working a desk. They have this brief moment where they kind of lock eyes, and he kind of like looks away, pretends to get a drink of water, but he's like, oh God, what is going on? And he kind of like sneaks another look to see, oh no, he is a detective or something, right? He's like,
yep. Yeah, he's
and he remembers back to the conversation that Frank had with Ben, right, as well, because they were talking about Gordon, someone, and I think that's the name of the detective there, the man in yellow.
Yeah, what's his bloody name?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, Tom Gordon, detective.
Right.
And he's the partner of Laura Dern's father.
Yes. Yeah. So of course he leaves the police station, and then basically goes to Sandy's house to speak to her dad.
Yeah.
Thinking that maybe, if we speak to him outside of the station, maybe I can, explain everything, make some sense of it. Of course, Sandy's dad is happy to see him at first. He's like, oh, hey, he's like, I think I need to speak to you. And he's like, hey, yeah, you look like you've had a facelift.
Yeah, that like you had a facelift.
And he says, I have something to show you. And he basically pulls out a bunch of photos that he took with his My First Spy gear.
Yeah.
Which is adorable.
Yeah.
Right. He says, oh, this is Frank. He's a very sick and dangerous man. His address is on the back of the photo. And he's like the photo of another man and Frank. They went into Frank's building. And of course, he's looking at Sandy's dad to kind of judge the response.
Yeah.
And of course, the second photo is the second man is the yellow man.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's like, that man came out and met a third man. Of course, that was also Dennis Hopper. And it's so clearly fake. Like I think probably intentionally so, but it's such a crap disguise.
Yeah.
And they say he says like, I think that Frank kidnapped her son and husband, Dorothy's son and husband, and the detective's first response is Sandy involved in this?
Yeah.
Who else knows? And he's like, oh no, just you and the photo lab. No one else knows. And he says, this is the end of it now, right? You're going to mind your own business and just go away. And he says, yeah. And he's like, all right, you better be. And I'll tell you another thing. Sandy better not be involved in this. And he says, well, be prepared to come in for further interrogation later, at a later date. So of course Sandy's been kind of sat on the stairs the whole time waiting, overhearing presumably what's going on. Thin walls in this house, which is how this whole thing started in the first place.
Yeah.
And he, she says, hey, did you tell him about me? And he's like, no, I didn't tell him. You get the impression that the detective might have overheard, though, because he's kind of right around the corner. But they start talking about Friday, don't they? And they're like, oh yes, of course I'll see you on Friday. I can't wait. And yeah, so it's a date on Friday night, and I don't think her dad is convinced one bit. To be honest, the look he gives her after is like the only time he kind of looks angry the entire film.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, I think he knows. Yeah. I think he knows, because how would he have found out about Dorothy or anything else? Yeah. It's like, I think it was her. Most likely. But yeah, so we then cut, I think, the following day we see Jeffrey obviously visits his dad, but he also does the lawn. He's become the adult now. He's watering the lawn now. But yeah, so he then heads over to meet Sandy, and of course greeted by her mum. Sandy's all dressed up, and it's all the all American first date.
Yeah.
But then of course, is it Tom, the man in yellow? He turns up. Yeah. And he's immediately like the father's like, oh, wait there, Tom, and he's like, right, Jeffrey, you go have a good night.
The horror on Jeffrey's face as he sees him is like, oh my god, he's here.
Yeah,
it's all good.
Yeah, and he's like, all right, yeah, you go have a good night now. Look after my daughter.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so they head out, and he says, hey, it's good to see you, and she's like, yes, it's good to see you too. They're both clearly like uncomfortable. Like it's probably the first time that she's looked quite uncomfortable around him.
Yeah.
She's still infatuated with him, but you can see there is that kind of like she's a bit more defensive in the way she is in the car with him. Yeah. Kind of changes by the time they get to the party thing, but
yeah. And I did forget. I did mess up earlier on. I thought it was earlier that they said that they loved each other, but it's not. It's at the party, isn't it?
Oh, you may be right.
say they love each other?
I forget, to be honest. So yes, they dance and whatnot, and I think, as you're right, isn't it when they dance that she says
when they're dancing,
which again is the stereotypical American high school thing. You know, it'll be at the dance, they have their kiss, their second kiss.
It feels very much like prom, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it almost feels like Jeffrey is trying to put it behind him and go back to the innocence for a night. You know, like they're at this party, they're having their dance, and
safety sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And yeah, it almost, you almost feel like at this point it could just be like, oh, happy ending. He's given up and he's moved on, you know. But of course they then go to leave the party. But as they're driving, I think he thinks it's Frank at first, right?
Yeah, there's a car pursuing them.
Yeah.
Nudging them, and he immediately thinks it's Frank.
Yeah. But it's not Frank. It's the other person he's wronged in his life.
It's Mike.
It's Mike, who is an asshole in this.
I mean,
but I can kind of understand why he's annoyed. You know,
he hasn't done anything wrong.
No. What I mean is, I think driving your car into someone else's car and causing them to almost crash is a bit excessive. But he is drunk. He's drunk driving, I guess.
I mean, he's with his girl.
No. I get the anger. I just think attempted murder might have been a bit far. But yeah, because they pull up right outside of his own house. He's like, I'm gonna kick your ass outside of your own house. I want your mum and your auntie to see. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna kick your stupid ass right here, and he's clearly drunk. Is Mike, and he's like, look, you know, I think Sandy's like, oh, like stop, and he's like, I don't want to cause any problems, but then of course Dorothy appears, battered and naked. And at first Mike's like, who the fuck is that? Is that your mom? Like, you know, what the fuck is this? But of course he sees the way that Dorothy is and you know, the kind of state she's in.
It sort of sobers him up, doesn't it? And Mike's like, I don't want any part of this.
No, he's like, I'm sorry.
He backs down.
Yeah, he says like, I'm sorry. I don't want to, you know.
And one of his mates goes, oh, you're going to kick his ass.
yeah, his mate's like, I thought you were going to fight him. What are you doing? And yeah, she's like, oh, you know, we need to get her to an ambulance. I think Sandy's the one that's like, hey, my dad can get an ambulance faster than anyone around here.
And so this was inspired by, apparently Lynch was with his brother when they were little, and they were sort of out on the street, and a battered naked woman walked past them.
Oh my god!
And Lynch said that it upset him so much that he actually cried when he saw it. He said it was a weird experience.
It's a fucking horrible thing to see.
Yeah, so
especially like, at any age, but at that kind of age, Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they added it to this, and apparently when they filmed this scene as well, it was obviously outdoors.
Yeah,
and apparently the neighborhood turned up with picnic baskets and watched.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
what, so not knowing what the scene was, or?
Well, I think Rossellini tried to tell them what was going to happen, because I think she didn't want the audience.
Well, no, probably not. Yeah,
but they were sort of, oh no, we're here to see the movie being filmed, and so they, and apparently after it was filmed, they all sort of like quietly just sort of got up and walked away.
Yeah.
So it was like, yeah, and I think they got in. I think there was then a sort of a thing saying, we don't think you should be filming round here anymore, sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. Well, depending on the order in which they shot things, they might have been all right.
Yeah.
It certainly feels like the kind of external shot you would do last.
Yeah, I would.
Like this is the last shot we're doing outside.
Let's do this to begin with.
But yeah, so they take her. They're going to take her to Sandy's parents to call an ambulance. But of course, as they drive away, she looks at Jeffrey and she's like, "Oh my god, Jeffrey, is that you?" And he's like, "Yes." and then of course she kind of embraces him, and it's Sandy can see that there's something there.
Yeah.
And yeah, so they take her into the house. Sandy's mum has called an ambulance.
She's gonna get a blanket for her, sort of thing.
Yeah, she's like, I think I'll get some clothes for this woman.
Yeah. And Dorothy whispers, to Jeffrey that you're my secret lover, my secret love.
Yeah, you're my secret love, and of course, Sandy is just destroyed.
Poor Sandy, absolutely devastated. After, especially after that, they 10 minutes ago they were expressing their love for one another, and now
because she's her mum says, "Oh, I've called the police. The police are on their way," and she's like, "Oh my god, not the police, not the police!" And then she starts screaming at him, "I love you, love me too!" And that's when Sandy just completely breaks. And he says, "Oh god, like Sandy, please, I'm sorry." And Sandy's like, what is going on here? And he's like, I'll tell you. Dorothy says something like they've hurt his head. Don't like her husband's head or something.
Yeah.
And she says, promise you'll help him. And we hear the sirens start to arrive. And then doesn't she say, "Oh, he put his disease in me again," which obviously really upsets Sandy again and starts her crying again. So the ambulance comes and takes Dorothy out. Jeffrey Jeffrey goes up to Sandy and kind of looks at her mum, and her mum's like, "Yeah, I should probably leave you two to talk this one out." Sandy slaps him, I think probably quite rightly. At this stage. But yes, it then almost immediately cuts to her on the phone saying, "I forgive you."
Yes.
It's such a teenage thing, isn't it?
Yeah. 5 minutes later, type thing.
Yeah, she's like, "Oh God, I love you. I forgive you, Jeffrey." It's like, oh my God, it's so teeny behavior.
We learned that the detective is doing a raid on headquarters.
Yes.
And I love the way that the raid you see the raid filmed. And there's no sort of, you get a shootout, sure, but you don't really see the shootout, isn't it?
No.
All you see is you get a shot of the windows of Frank's men shooting down. You don't really see them properly. You just see the shots and things, and you see it cuts to, you get the almost merged shots of the cops in their cars shooting back, and you get dead bodies. And it's almost like it's not interesting in seeing the actual shootout itself. They just want to show you sort of that it exists and there's an aftermath. Yes,
yeah. And of course, meanwhile, Jeffrey is heading back to the apartment. Against Sandy's wishes. I think Sandy even calls for her dad, doesn't she? She's like, "Oh, he needs help, and where is he?" And of course, they can't find where her dad is right now or something.
Yeah.
But of course, he lets himself back in with the keys. It's a fucking shit show in the house. When he enters the apartment, and there's the yellow man is dead, but just standing. I don't think he's even hanging from anything, is he?
No, he's stood up. He's still alive.
He's just. Oh, is he alive still?
Yeah. No, he's still alive because his eyes are open, and he's just.
I thought he was dead with his eyes open.
No, I think he's still alive because he's sort of twitching.
Right.
His brain.
Yeah, he's fucked. He's clearly not well. There's a piece of his head missing.
Yeah, I think Frank has shot him.
Yeah. And then the is it Ben with the thing in his mouth, or is it just someone else? I can't remember. It's the guy with the missing ear.
Yeah, it's what is his name? Don, isn't it? Is it Don?
Oh yes, sorry, yes, no, of course it's yeah.
Yeah, he's tied to a chair
with a missing ear.
And he's got a hole in his head too.
Yes, he's definitely dead. He's 100% dead.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they have the shootout during this time, as you said, and yeah,
he goes to leave, doesn't he?
Jeffrey
he's going to leave, but as he's going down the stairs, he sees the well-dressed man.
I wonder who it could be.
Yeah.
So yeah, of course, seeing that, he decides, oh God, I'm gonna.
Yeah, he runs back into the apartment and he grabs the radio from the Yellow Man.
Yes. Yeah.
And he basically says he puts a call out to Sandy's dad and says, oh, he's here, Frank's here, he's coming up the stairs, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then he realizes that, excuse me, that Frank has a radio too.
Yes.
So he then says, "Oh, I'm hiding in the back room. I'm hiding in the bedroom."
Yeah, and of course Frank comes in and he's like immediately like, "I've got a radio shit for brains."
Fucking idiot. And of course, before Frank comes in, Jeffrey's gone. Also, he grabs Dom's revolver.
Yes.
And he hides back in the wardrobe.
Yeah. Yeah. And we get quite a prolonged sequence of Frank shooting every room.
like overly dramatically screaming and running into rooms trying to find him.
Yeah, in ways that only Dennis Hopper can, I guess.
Yeah.
He even like double taps the Yellow Man.
Yeah.
He shoots him in the head again. Yeah, he's like, well, he's definitely dead now.
Really, but he's definitely dead now because yeah.
Well, he falls over that time, right?
Yeah. And apparently, the actor, I think is Fred Pickler, I think his name is.
Right.
Apparently, after they filmed that scene, he went to McDonald's.
What, like that?
Still on.
Amazing.
Yeah, and apparently the poor woman in the counter freaked out when she saw him, and he had to explain that it was not real. It was from he was filming a scene down the road, sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's always one of my favourite things from the stories from Near Dark.
What? Just turning up in makeup and yeah.
Lance Henriksen and
man, they look so fucking disgusting in those films as well.
After they filmed the shootout scene, they went for a drive and they got pulled over. And it was a copper turn. Sort of pulled them over, and when he walked up to he got to where the driver's seat and saw them, he immediately drew his revolver, and they were like, whoa.
So no, I'm Lance Hendrickson. Lance Hendrickson.
It's makeup. We're not.
Yeah, you don't think about things like that in this country.
No.
But like, they could just fucking shoot you.
Very easily get shot.
Yeah, like it's a dangerous fucking game to play for sure. It's like when we had over here, well, I guess it probably happened in America as well, but when we had that spate of people dressing up as clowns over here and doing creepy clown stuff, it's like if you did that in America, I imagine you'll just get shot. That would be the end of it.
Possibility, yeah.
Like it's a much more high risk activity in other countries, that's for sure.
Especially, there are a lot of gun carrying ladies out there, and
yeah. Well, and if you're fucking being a creepy clown, what would you expect?
I actually was stood on a bus stop when somebody slowly drove past me in full horror clown makeup, and I just ignored him.
Yeah, I find ignoring people the best option because it kind of deflates them completely when you're just like whatever.
Good for you, dude.
Yeah, you do you.
React to that, mate.
No, I'm exactly the same. So anyway, after shooting every room, he realizes, maybe the wardrobe. So he does a whole bunch of drugs.
Probably the actual only place in the entire apartment where someone could actually hide.
But I think he makes a mistake of doing the drugs first because he just doesn't think well enough and just opens the door. And it's a superb headshot.
Mm-hmm.
The practical effect of his head kind of exploding out, the brain exploding out the back of his head is like, oh my god, that was really a really graphic shot.
Yeah.
And of course, just as he does, he shoots him in the head, and just as he does, Sandy comes in, and of course, her dad comes in. Frank is dead on the floor, brains everywhere, and then we get the light go out with the same noise that we had from the hosepipe at the start, or very similar noise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, you get them sort of outside, don't you, with the light when the light comes up really bright.
Yes.
Like, like the light is coming back, sort of like.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, because they kiss in the hallway and stuff, don't they? And all is well. And then like you said, is a fade to white. We then see, I think it's a close up on an ear, but it's actually, isn't it his ear? Yeah, because he's lying on the sunbed, isn't he? Yeah. He's enjoying the sun, and everything is great. And he says, "Oh, everything's so much better." But then, of course, Sandy sees the very fake looking Robin with the bug.
Yeah, but you get that she calls him into dinner, and everyone's there. His dad's there, and
it's an idyllic thing.
I'm sure Paul, Jack Nance's character, is with his dad in the back. I mean, in the
probably,
garden, is weird. And then you get them in the kitchen. Again, it's that whole 50s idyllic life sort of thing.
It is. Now, do you think I'm giving them too much credit if I say I think the Robin might look fake on purpose?
Oh yeah.
I feel like it's more of an intentional thing than an accidental thing.
It's artificial, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's like the life is. It's artificial.
Absolutely. So this idea that the Robins, the light has consumed the dark, the bugs, is kind of fake. It's not real.
Yeah, it's not. It's the sheen.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you get the weird sort of like, oh look, the Robins have come back, and look, it's eating a bug, and the ant sort of there going, oh, I could never eat a bug, or she's stuffing her face with something that looks like a bug.
Yeah. We see Dorothy and her kid, all happy and back together. And a nice pan up into the sky, which then transitions into the blue velvet again. Yeah. As we get the
going by, and and then the picket fences, and
the innocence returned, or is it?
Well, I think but I think it's the sheen goes back on, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's still clear that the dark, seedy underbelly is still very much there.
Yeah,
but he has retreated to the idyllic life.
Yeah,
he'll just live in ignorance of that stuff.
Yeah.
But yes, that was Blue Velvet, a very strange, surreal, I don't know, Lynchian. It's just it's a term for its, he has a term for his own films, which because I do often find a lot of surrealist stuff a little too much for me. I think I said last time, Lynch has a way, of making it very palatable to me. I don't know how.
Yeah, I think he had a way of making it accessible, I think.
Yeah, well, people often say he's kind of the gateway to the surreal, isn't he?
Yeah.
To surrealist kind of films.
I think it's because he understands dreams,
Yeah.
And I think he can tap into, almost anybody can see these things and get, like they felt them themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas something like if you see, I don't know, if you see Chien Andalou, that real surrealist.
Yeah.
Like Dali surrealism sort of stuff. If you see that, that's where you get the real, like, what the fuck am I watching?
Yes. Yeah.
And the whole point of those things is doesn't matter.
No, exactly that.
Whereas I think Lynch always has a core to his movies. There's always a sort of,
yeah, I agree.
And I think he truly believed in light and dark.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And he believed that, sure, there are certainly horrible, dark things going on, but there is light, there is real, there is real goodness in the world too.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so that was Blue Velvet, and obviously, R.I.P. David Lynch.
Yeah, and I think this is even though it has a surreal core to it, it is a lot more accessible than some of his later movies.
I would totally agree. Yeah.
You know, I think when you get to Inland Empire and
oh yeah, fucking hell,
and you know, when you get that, that's when they really do take off. And I mean, I suppose, to be honest, his first movie, Eraserhead, is, though again at the core, it's actually a simple story of.
I was going to say, yeah, Eraserhead, I certainly vibe with a little more.
Yeah, it's at its core, it's a simple story of a dad, you know, worrying about being a dad.
Yeah,
you know.
Well, I think wasn't it just basically that's what David Lynch was going through at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And although it's full of hideous things and
oh yeah, of course, yeah.
You know, ladies living in the radiator, and you know, and a weird mutant baby. It's still accessible, and I think Blue Velvet is it's still a pretty straightforward story, really.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a weirdly tinged noir movie, I guess, is how you would sort of you could say it is.
Mm-hmm. But in any case, we will be back next week reviewing new films. But yeah, definitely check this movie out. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.